Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time. An update on our lead story today, that reality show TV star turned convicted felon Todd Chrisley was just released from prison after a pardon from President Trump. Let's go back to NewsNation's Brian Anton live outside that prison in Pensacola, Florida. Brian, I hear they snuck him out the back.
They did, Elizabeth. I heard a rumor that this was going to happen. You know, this prison is actually controlled by the Navy because it's on a Navy base, and I was told the Navy was going to help them get out through a back small little entrance. It's hard to even see on the map, but they did it. So Todd Chrisley is now out of prison. He's on his way back to Nashville right now, I'm told. A lot of the fans who are here don't really realize it yet, so they're going to be disappointed because they wanted to see him come by. His wife, Julie Chrisley, I am told, is still in prison right now. In Kentucky. Their son is there, Grayson, their son is there, hoping to get her out sometime soon, hopefully tonight, he says.
Going to be quite a family reunion for the Chrisleys, who still had many years left on those prison sentences before getting...
Well, listen to this.
Yeah?
You say that. Yeah, they haven't seen each other or been able to talk to each other for 2.5 years, which I thought was interesting. They're not allowed to talk on the phone. So it is going to be an interesting reunion.
Well, Brian Anton, you've been in touch with Todd Chrisley for years now. From behind bars, he was calling you to complain about the prison conditions inside that pretty minimal security prison there in Pensacola, Florida. But I'm sure if he talks to anybody, it'll be to you. So stay tuned, as they say.
The Chrisley's privileged world came crashing down 2022. Todd and Julie indicted for federal tax evasion and bank fraud. They went to jail. They actually went to prison January of this year, serving a combined 19-year prison sentence. He's in Pensacola, Florida. Julie's in Lexington, Kentucky. Until now, Chrisley hasn't spoken to the media since the sentence began. But NewsNation's senior national correspondent, Brian Anton, got it done and got an exclusive with Todd from prison. It is good to have you. I am not surprised by your success, but I am glad that you worked it because this is somebody the audience wants to hear from. What do you got?
Yeah, it was difficult getting him, Chris. You know, I was interested. I follow his daughter, Savannah, on social media, and she was posting a ton about the awful, awful prison conditions at the prison camp in Pensacola, the federal prison camp where he is. Also, they just granted an oral argument in their appeal, which I thought was interesting. So I started digging into it, talked to the lawyer. The lawyer gave us permission to go interview him in prison, sent you guys sent your social security number, you fill out all this paperwork, and they denied us access to the prison, saying that it was a security risk.
Because of your rap sheet?
Yeah, no, not because of my rap sheet. It actually didn't really make much sense. I mean, I don't know how it was a security risk. When you get denied something, it makes you want to push even harder, and I promise it wasn't.
I tell you, you think you're going to rob all these houses, and it just goes away because you've become a big shot at that correspondent? Right. The past doesn't go away, Brian.
No,
I'm just kidding. So how'd you get in there, and what happened?
Yeah, so I kept pushing. We weren't able to get in. They denied us. But through the lawyer, we were able to relay questions to Todd. We never reached out to Todd. I don't want to get Todd in trouble, so I want to make that clear. This was all through the lawyer. We were able to ask him questions, and then he relayed the questions to Todd. But he's very upset about the conditions in this prison, and he's putting himself at risk by doing this and exposing what he says is going on. But listen to a little bit of what he said. Do you feel like you're being treated fairly by the guards and the prison staff?
No. There are recordings of staff members here talking about he needs to be humble. What we need to do is we need to put him in diesel therapy and put him in shackles and let him ride around the country for 4 nights and then bring him back, and that will humble him. He thinks this is one of his mansions that he's used to living in, but this is okay. That's what's on the record. There was a photograph taken of me while I was sleeping and sent to my daughter asking for $2,600 a month for my protection.
Wow. What about the food, Todd? I mean, Savannah has talked about the food. Can you, is it unsafe?
It is so disgustingly filthy. The food is literally, and I'm not exaggerating this, the food is dated It's out of date by, at minimum, a year. It's a year past expiration. And they are literally starving these men to death here. These men are getting, I don't know that they're getting 1,000 calories a day.
So what are you eating if you're not eating the food?
The only food that I eat is what I make that I buy from commissary. One of the warden's ways of kind of, I've been told this by a staff member, one of the ways she's trying to break me is by cutting down what you can buy in commissary. So before she came here, you could buy 12 packs of tuna a week. She cut it down to 6, then it went from 6 to 3. She is not given a reason. She says, when I asked her about it, she says, commissary is a privilege, not a right.
So do you only eat tuna?
I eat tuna, I eat peanut butter, that's where I get protein. I eat like a pasta salad that I make, pasta that I get in commissary, and then I start over again doing the same thing the next week. You've got rats, you've got squirrels in the storage facility where the food is. They just covered it up with plastic and tore the ceiling out because of all the black mold and found a dead cat in the ceiling that dropped down on the top of the food. My
gosh.
So they're not letting you in here because it's a breach of security or whatever. They don't want you in here where you can see what's really going on.
Now, we reached out to the prison, Chris. They say that there's nutritious food, that the facilities are, up to date and fine. But Savannah has pictures, and, there's a real concern based on what Todd says about what's going on inside this specific prison. Chrisley details abuse he says other inmates are reporting to him, including sexual assaults inside the prison.
Made him put his hands on the desk and spread his legs. And he reached up his legs like he was patting him down and grabbed his private area. And he said, what do we have here? Is this a weapon? And he said, that's my... And he said that, when he said that, grabbed him by his hips and started dry humping him from behind. I'm sitting here right now with multiple signed affidavits by inmates that will talk about the inappropriateness of what's going on here.
And I have obtained many of those signed affidavits right here. I've been going through them. One inmate says a guard, quote, was using the rebar metal hook to pull the milk crates around while I was facing the grill. He hit me between the legs, striking my testicles. I winced in pain when I turned around to tell him that it hurt. There's another inmate in his late 60s who wrote in a statement that when leaving the dining hall, he was stopped by a female prison official who personally frisked me down, including groping my groin area, looking for illegal contraband. I understand that I must be searched by a male unless it is an emergency situation. I don't think bringing an apple out of the dining hall constitutes an emergency. But Chrisley also told me that after he encouraged inmates to start putting their experiences in writing, suddenly, he says, the printer that they were using to print all of these things out and give them to him no longer worked.
All of these men here, I said, unless you put it in writing, it doesn't happen. The system is broken, and unless you hold these people accountable, nothing will change. These men started putting in cop-outs, DP8s, DP9s. Well, then all of a sudden, when they started doing that, the copier and the printer in the library that the men have to use, it was shut down. So they couldn't make the copies to put the cop-outs in. They shut the printer down and claimed that it was out of ink. Now, I've got this in writing because I wrote it up and sent it to them in an email, and they came back, we're out of cartridges. This is a federal facility. If all of these other machines are running in all these other offices, how did that one copier that the inmates choose not have a cartridge?
All right, I want to bring in NewsNation legal analyst Sarah Azari. I mean, clearly this prison, he's a real thorn in their side at this point. What do you make, though, of the, I mean, they punished him very quickly today.
And you were busted. Your name was all over that thing.
I was in that report. I know. I was like, oh, man.
Right. So, look, most of my clients are white-collar offenders, and I've had them in the BOP in these camps. I have clients there now. I'm not surprised. You know, this is the most barbaric and revolting institution to me. I got 7 or 8 people out during COVID because of the conditions in these prisons, and he is the bane of their existence. This institution is about opacity, not transparency. And Todd Chrisley has gathered up all these inmates with legitimate complaints to expose this prison camp and others, frankly, in the BOP. So they want him out of there, and I'm not surprised that magically the printer broke. But here's the thing with the printer. There are grievances he's complaining about, the mold, the expired food, etc. Those are absolutely unacceptable and have to be remedied. But the printer, there's an alternative. It's a No. 2 pencil and lined paper. And I have, in almost 20 years of practice, I've never received a nicely printed, typed up correspondence from an inmate in federal prison. It's always a No. 2 pencil on paper. So, they have to give him that option to do it, manually. But, the thing to do here is for that, there's a power in numbers. So he needs to go up the chain within the BOP system, file the grievance, go through the appellate process within the system, and then turn it over to the courts. He can't just go directly to sue the BOP for injunctive relief. But I think he's on that track. I mean, I think that, not everyone has the platform that he does or the daughter that he does.
Right. Well, I tried to go in and interview him and do a sit-down interview and go through the Bureau of Prisons and have it all arranged, and they flat out said no.
And I have a problem with that. And I have a problem with that because, look, that is an absolute violation of the First Amendment for us. We and the press and the media.
Is he allowed to talk, though?
That is a prison policy that says you're not supposed to speak to the press. So it's not the law. It's not the law. And I think that policy needs to be challenged. I think it's unconstitutional because you and I and members of the public, we have a right to know what goes on in these prisons. And it's a violation.
Yeah, and for everybody, I got some heat. We don't care about Todd Chrisley. He's a criminal. This isn't really about Todd Chrisley. Notice we don't ever talk about really even his crimes or what he's accused of. It's about the conditions. It's about our taxpayer money paying for these prisons. It's about why won't they let us in? I mean, this is the government, and we have to go. But go ahead,
just
quickly.
Real quick, the sexual assault that he's complaining about, these allegations are true. They have to be reported to the FBI. We have no time for crime. This is not just a regular.
Well, we'll stay on it. Thank you, Sarah.
Back now with breaking news of President Trump's pardon of Todd and Julie Chrisley. They were serving a combined 19 years in prison for tax evasion and bank fraud. They've been in prison since 2023. President Trump pardoned them today. It was the only time we actually saw President Trump today. It was a video put online by one of his staffers of him calling Savannah Chrisley, their daughter, who has been fighting on their behalf now for a pardon and spoke at the RNC. You can see her there. Savannah's with us on the phone on her way to Florida to go see her dad as he gets out of jail. Savannah, I understand that the president called you and you were walking into Sam's Club?
Yes, the president called me as I was walking into Sam's Club, and I didn't know what to do. I just ran back to my car at that point.
All right. Help me understand, because there's a lot of people who are thinking about this tonight. What was your pitch to President Trump about why your parents deserved a pardon and what you think finally got through to him?
Yeah, I have fought for the past 2.5 years for my parents to come home, and I've been fighting for their freedom. I have said from the very beginning, I believe in law and order, and if I believe that my parents were guilty of what they did, then yes, they should have gone to prison. I do not believe that even if they were guilty, the time they got was, it was absolutely insane. But I brought up in our case the huge Fourth Amendment violations, the illegal seizures, the fact that they had my father's face on a dartboard, the IRS agent lying on the stand and referring to us as the Trumps of the South, and also accusing my family of terrorism just so they could run a financial report.
And what do you think, what resonated with President Trump when he called you today? Was there some piece of the case that he said, all right, Savannah, this is why I've finally seen your view of it?
Well, he did say, he was like, you guys don't look like terrorists to me, was his exact words, which was pretty funny. But he just said that their sentences were outrageous and they were treated unfairly from everyone that he has spoken to, and that he wanted to bring my parents home and not just grant them a commutation, but he wanted to give them a full pardon.
Well, and that means that it's like it never happened. They can move on with their lives. You're 27. I met you, I think, once or twice along the way. We can hear Southwest calling calling you. So make sure you don't miss the flight. But I want to talk just for a second. One of the things I've so admired about you is that you have taken care of your younger siblings, Grayson and Chloe, through all this.
Yes.
When you shared the news with them, what was that like?
Grayson was actually with me, so he was in the car with me, and he actually spoke to the president himself, and they spoke about Grayson goes to University of Alabama, so they spoke about President Trump speaking at Alabama, and Grayson got to thank the president for bringing his parents home. Chloe, I think, is still in shock, and she doesn't want to get her hopes up because she feels like something bad's going to happen. But I'm excited to be going to get my dad and bringing him home to her. So we're excited.
So what's the plan for the next 24, 48 hours?
Well, if they don't release them tonight, then it will be tomorrow. So we are just going to get my parents home and get them acclimated back to normal life. It's going to be hard. It's been 2.5 years. And I don't think I'm mentally or emotionally prepared to see my parents see each other for the first time or hear each other's voice for the first time because it has been almost 3 years.
Wow. Any favorite foods for the homecoming meal?
You know, we're just trying to get that. We're just getting them home now, but their 29th wedding anniversary was actually on May 25th. So they'll have a late wedding anniversary, and we're just super excited and eternally grateful to President Trump and the administration. And I wholeheartedly believe, I went on Laura Trump's show, and I wholeheartedly believe that that helped to put things over because he watches every episode of her show. She is doing a great job on Fox, and I think that episode of her show reminded the president of my family story.
Well, Savannah, what I will say, I've known you for a long time. To have a daughter as dedicated to her parents as you have been and to their fight is something really special. I know it kept them going for the past few years. We'd love to talk to them when you guys are all together as a family, and we're going to let you get off the phone before they yell at you on that Southwest plane.
Right? I know, because we know they will. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I appreciate just everyone within the administration. Alice Johnson was the greatest appointment that President Trump could have ever done.
All right.
She has fought tooth and nail for my family, as the pardons are, as well as countless other individuals that are seeking pardons. So I am forever grateful to her, the administration, and just everyone that stood behind us throughout this whole thing. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and your parents are lucky to have you as a daughter. Good luck and Godspeed.
Thank you. God bless.
Todd Chrisley, big deal, he and the family, reality stars. Chrisley knows best. Lavish Southern lifestyle. He's supposedly like this no-nonsense parent. Then became all nonsense because Todd and his wife were convicted of tax evasion and fraud. The sentence is like 19 years combined in federal prison. So, turns out Chrisley believes that the conditions are inhumane. So without the permission of the prison, he gives an interview to the big man, Brian Enton of NewsNation fame. He alleged some very serious things about what's happening there. Here's a little bit.
Do you feel like you're being treated fairly by the guards and the prison staff?
No. There are recordings of staff members here talking about he needs to be humbled. What we need to do is we need to put him in diesel therapy and put him in shackles and let him ride around the country for 4 nights and then bring him back, and that will humble him. He thinks this is one of his mansions he's used to living in, but this is okay.
So, what happened after he gave the interview? His daughter, Savannah Chrisley, joins us now. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
How you doing at home with your siblings? This is a lot you got on your plate.
Yes, we grow up together. That's what I like to say. We're growing up together. Right now at the holidays, it's tough with our parents not being here, but we make the most of every day and try to stay positive.
All right, that's the way to do it for sure. Not easy to say. I wish you luck with it. So what happened after your father gave the interview?
Once my father gave the interview, there was talk that they were going to try to shut down my visitation. They were going to suspend my visitation, and then they were also going to try to suspend his legal calls, which obviously is a huge Sixth Amendment violation. So that has not happened yet. But after his interview, the deputy director of the BOP notified his facility that he was coming for a visit. And that right there is the first step. I mean, the fact that he notified them, that's not okay. It allows this prison to then continue to cover up all of their messes, which in fact they did.
Have they moved him? Have they threatened him? You know, have you been able to speak to him about, you know, any messaging?
Yes, I have spoken to him, and the deputy director promised him that there would be no retaliation, so I hope that is in fact true. I do know last night one of the COs came in his dorm at about 1 o'clock, and that correctional officer reeked of alcohol, had alcohol on his breath, and is known for drinking on the job, and yanked down the towels that my dad was using to conceal his bunk. So that right there is an issue. You're putting my father in jeopardy because you have a correctional officer that has a drinking problem on the job.
What is the goal? To get an investigation done? I mean, I know you have parallel tracks here. You got how it is for him on the inside, and then, of course, fighting the case and the conviction as well. But what are you trying to do?
I think for me, I want to create lasting change. This isn't just about my parents, but before them, I didn't know any better. I wasn't subjected to any of this, and now I see it. Now I know better. And my goal at the end of this is to completely deconstruct the BOP. And we live in the United States of America, what's supposed to be the greatest nation on earth, and how we're judged how we treat our prisoners. And how we're treating them is inhumane. And I believe that under the Administrative Procedures Act, I believe it is, of 1946, there are multiple remedies that we can take in order to hold the BOP accountable.
You took some pictures when you were in there?
I did not. So there are actually people who work at the facility that have sent me and my lawyers photos and environmental reports.
What are those, ants?
There's some kind of bug, that is for sure.
And what is this?
And here is that is the expired food. That the BOP responded to my claims stating that the food was not expired. But meanwhile, Monday, they had all the prisoners moving out the expired food, so the deputy director didn't see it. And then as soon as he left, they brought all the food back in.
NewsNation's senior national correspondent Brian Enton is back with us. We heard part of his exclusive interview with reality star Todd Chrisley. Chrisley's going to get heat for saying that things suck in prison and he's being targeted, and he's got a 10-year sentence if his appeals don't work out, bank fraud, tax evasion. Wife Julie also behind bars. Brian then goes next level of perspective. 26-year-old daughter Savannah. Now she has to raise her brother and niece. Here's a little taste of that.
I'm a single parent now, really how you look at it. Sure, I'm their sister, but I'm also a single parent, and I'm a single income household. I'm trying to get 2 kids through school and just healthcare, all these different things. So I know what it's like to have to sit there and think, oh shoot, like, how do I need to budget this month? How do I need to get through this month? Because my life's completely changed.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine based on the show.
For sure.
You thinking about that.
Exactly, because I was like a normal 20-something-year-old who got money, and I was just living life. I thought it was never going to end. And then on top of it, also getting to a place to where now we're in the midst of this appeal, and there's tons of money that has to be spent. So I'm going to spend whatever I have to spend in order to bring justice to my parents.
Yeah, I really felt for Savannah, Chris, because regardless of what you think of the parents, I mean, she's 26 years old. She had to take custody of the kids. She's their mom now, essentially. Every single weekend, for the most part, they go to the prison either in Florida to visit Todd or Kentucky to visit Julie. And she's nervous. She goes and visits her dad, and her dad says, look, this is what's going on in the prison. Get it out there. He says he saw a guy almost die, bleed out in there. All sorts of awful things with some of these older prisoners that are in their 70s. He relays the information to Savannah. She's nervous. She doesn't want her dad to get in trouble, but you know, she's trying to respect his wishes. She then posts this stuff on social media because she says that the family wants to expose what's going on behind bars.
One of the greatest leveling mechanisms in our society is incarceration.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're rich, in the middle, or struggling. Everybody goes through the same kind of pain, even the Chrisleys. Now, what else stood out to you in the interview?
Yeah, well, there was one other thing. We spoke with their lawyer, Jay Sargent, who there's a whole other part to this, which I'll get to, you know, in future shows. But they've got an appeal that they're filing. It's actually they granted oral arguments. There's a lot of really interesting stuff in the appeal. It could be successful. They feel they were unfairly treated.
By the way, Brian is saying, hold on a second, just for the people at home who aren't as savvy. Oral argument, very rare in appeals.
Yeah.
Usually it's just briefed. So it is seen as a nod towards legitimacy and sufficiency by the bench, the judge, if you get to argue orally. Continue.
Perfect. That's why you're the lawyer. Thank you for the explanation. So it's a big deal that they got the oral argument. They feel that they were unfairly targeted. This is what the lawyer had to say.
Our criminal justice system, I believe, has let them down. I believe that they're going to have a chance now before the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and I think we're going to be able to argue that effectively and correct an injustice that shouldn't have existed to begin with.
Is it true that one of the investigators had Todd Chrisley's head on a dartboard?
Yeah, sad but true. I heard the same thing, that the Chrisleys were targeted, and that there was an agent from the Georgia Department of Revenue that actually had Todd's picture like it was a target, and he was aiming at it.
So the dartboard is interesting, Chris. They're also alleging that they searched a warehouse without a search warrant, which they make a very good argument there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. A few weeks ago, we heard from reality star Todd Chrisley from behind bars. He and his wife, Julie, are serving a combined 19 years in prison for tax evasion and fraud. And he told me of the horrible conditions he and his fellow inmates are living in. But that interview did not come apparently without a price. His daughter, Savannah, claims he is facing a major backlash in prison. She recently posted this from her Instagram page, quote, "How ironic that the warden is trying to ship my dad," after the NewsNation interview with Chris Cuomo and Brian Entin, claiming that they're inciting a riot and a risk to institutional safety. Get real. Savannah Chrisley joins me now. Savannah, it's always good to see you. I'm curious, what is the latest with your dad since we heard from him behind bars? Has he suffered any kind of retaliation?
The retaliation is real. It is heartbreaking for me to watch as his daughter, but they have even gone to the extent of stating that they will try to ship him to a state facility because our federal institutions cannot guarantee his safety.
Tell me about this letter, Savannah. You received an anonymous letter after our story from workers in the prison.
Yes, so there are individuals who work in that facility who are giving me all the information, which should scare the warden and the BOP. The BOP has called me a liar numerous times, but I have all the information to back it up. And these letters, I mean, I even have recordings of them speaking about shipping my father, but they have to have a good reason to. They have to find something he's in violation of. So I have heard they're going to the extent of planning cell phones, drugs, going through his lockers so that they can send him to a facility and truly behind bars.
You know, he talks about really just a heartbreaking situation in that prison with other elderly inmates. And these are people there for the most part who, you know, haven't committed violent offenses. It's a lot of like people who stole money and that kind of thing. He talked about one man in particular. We haven't played this part of the talk yet, but I want you to listen and then we'll get your reaction.
They treat this man like a piece of garbage. And the man fell in the hallway in our dorm, and he hit his head. And keep in mind, he got up because he was literally bleeding from his rectum and throwing up blood. Went over, I sat down on his bed, and I said, God. And so he opened his eyes, and he said, I'm so happy to see you. Oh. son needs help. They took him to the hospital after keeping him up in medical for like 5 hours. But the only reason they took him is because he passed out in medical. They took him and had to do brain surgery on him. Cut his skull open in 2 places, 8 inches long, to stop the bleeding on the brain. They brought him back here after about 4 days with staples in his head. And he was hurting so bad, and all they told him was to take Tylenol. They didn't have the prescription. The doctor called the prescription in. So the man lay here in his bed with these staples in his head in excruciating pain, and all he could take was over-the-counter headache powder.
I mean, what is it like for you to hear that, Savannah?
It's heartbreaking because I hear a story that could very well be my life. And that's the heartbreaking thing. And, you know, I get accused today. I was accused of being a democratic socialist. And you look at it and you laugh. And my response was, why? Because of my love for criminal justice reform and to give these men a second chance. And what's so heartbreaking is you talk about these white-collar crimes. And Cory Booker just came out with a report in 2023 with the CARES Act that showed 13,000 men were sent home on home confinement and only 22 reoffended. So clearly it works. Why are we housing these men and wasting taxpayers' dollars? We've already wasted $140 million on housing these men in prison when they should have gotten out 6 months to a year ago.
Todd Chrisley, big deal, he and the family, reality stars. Chrisley knows best. Lavish Southern lifestyle. He's supposedly like this no-nonsense parent. Then became all nonsense because Todd and his wife were convicted of tax evasion and fraud. The sentence is like 19 years combined in federal prison. So, turns out Chrisley believes that the conditions are inhumane. So without the permission of the prison, he gives an interview to the big man, Brian Enton of NewsNation fame. He alleged some very serious things about what's happening there. Here's a little bit.
Do you feel like you're being treated fairly by the guards and the prison staff?
No. There are recordings of staff members here talking about he needs to be humble. What we need to do is we need to put him in diesel therapy and put him in shackles and let him ride around the country for 4 months and then bring him back, and that will humble him. He thinks this is one of his mansions he's used to living in, but this is the okay.
So, what happened after he gave the interview? His daughter, Savannah Chrisley, joins us now. It's nice to meet you. Thank you for taking the opportunity.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
How you doing at home with your siblings? This is a lot you got on your plate.
Yes, we grow up together. That's what I like to say. We're growing up together. Right now at the holidays, it's tough with our parents not being here, but we make the most of every day and try to stay positive.
All right, that's the way to do it for sure. Not easy to say. I wish you luck with it. So what happened after your father gave the interview?
Once my father gave the interview, there was talk that they were going to try to shut down my visitation. They were going to suspend my visitation, and then they were also going to try to suspend his legal calls, which obviously is a huge Sixth Amendment violation. So that has not happened yet. But after his interview, the deputy director of the BOP notified his facility that he was coming for a visit. And that right there is the first step. I mean, the fact that he notified them, that's not okay. It allows this prison to then continue to cover up all of their messes, which in fact they did.
Have they moved him? Have they threatened him? You know, have you been able to speak to him about, any messaging?
Yes, I have spoken to him, and the deputy director promised him that there would be no retaliation, so I hope that is in fact true. I do know last night one of the COs came in his dorm at about 1 o'clock, and that correctional officer reeked of alcohol, had alcohol on his breath, and is known for drinking on the job, and yanked down the towels that my dad was using to conceal his bunk. So that right there is an issue. You're putting my father in jeopardy because you have a correctional officer that has a drinking problem on the job.
What is the goal to get an investigation done? I mean, I know you have parallel tracks here. You got how it is for him on the inside, and then, of course, fighting the case and the conviction as well. But what are you trying to do?
I think for me, I want to create lasting change. This isn't just about my parents, but before them, I didn't know any better. I wasn't subjected to any of this, and now I see it. Now I know better. And my goal at the end of this is to completely deconstruct the BOP. And we live in the United States of America, what's supposed to be the greatest nation on earth, and how we're judged how we treat our prisoners. And how we're treating them is inhumane. And I believe that under the Administrative Procedures Act, I believe it is, of 1946, there are multiple remedies that we can take in order to hold the BOP accountable.
You took some pictures when you were in there?
I did not. So there are actually people who work at the facility that have sent me and my lawyers photos and environmental reports.
What are those, ants?
There's some kind of bug, that is for sure.
And what is this?
And here is that is the expired food. That the BOP responded to my claims stating that the food was not expired. But meanwhile, Monday, they had all the prisoners moving out the expired food, so the deputy director didn't see it. And then as soon as he left, they brought all the food back in.